What would you like to see more or less of as education?
Well, more emphasis on free playing, jazz playing, the art form of America. Uh, Maybe take some of the rigidness off of the emphasis off of reading music so much. I mean, kids got to learn to read music, that's true, but at the same time, apply some creativity in the classroom. Let them play, like even take a straight melody or something and let them improvise on it, or play it any way they want, to show the difference of two things. More creative aspect. There's a lot of creative young people out there that are not getting the chance to do it because there's no place to do it. And maybe in a classroom you could assimilate in some respect a playing scene. Like for instance, when I was coming up, there were places to go and play. And, sit in with different bands, play tunes, and everybody knew the standard repertory, and that's how you learn to play jazz. Today there aren't those places for the kids to do that. So maybe in the classroom we have to try to assimilate that or recreate that in some.
Need to play more.
Yeah, they have to play. They have to have an outlet to do it. There has to be. So since there's no outlets in clubs, maybe we have to create some somehow in the classroom.
You were an artist in residence for a while. How do you feel about that program?
Well, I think that was very good. I think that the kids relate to somebody that's experienced, who does it. The teachers, that's their whole career. They don't get a chance to go outside the classroom and do the things that a professional does. So therefore, I mean, the kids can get the benefit of both worlds, I think. Get somebody that's on the outside doing it, and then the benefit of the classroom all at the same time. So I think it's a great thing. I think there should be more of it. It depends on how the teachers, how they feel about it, and not. To me, I think there's not too many people understand it. I don't think, or want to do it.
Right.
I think they're content to leave things the way they are, and I think that's you don't have any progress that way.
All right, Ed.
Probably the first moment that I really became interested in jazz and interested in perhaps playing it was my father took me to see the Modern Jazz Quartet at Baker's Keyboard Lounge. And I remember seeing Percy Heath and seeing the bass, and he came and talked to me about the bass. I think I was about 7 or 8. And I mean, I didn't really understand the music or what was happening with the music, but I knew it was something great. I knew it was something that was better than what I was listening to, So my father had all the records around, and I wouldn't say there was one moment where I decided to play, but I think that ranks up there with the most memorable, experiences in the past.
When did you get exposed to like Charlie Parker and people like that?
All of that was pretty young, because my father was he always had it playing, and he had the records around, and I was always curious, and I would always play the records, and I liked the record covers. I saw the cover of Bitches Brew when I was real young, and I saw like all the naked women on it, and that made me want to listen to that, and I listened to it, and I liked it, and he had some Bird records. He had he had a lot of Miles records, and I think that Miles was probably the first person that I really checked out, extensively from a historical perspective, and I was in my, fairly young when I was first exposed to it, but when I really started listening to it, I was, maybe 15 or 16, or well, 13, 14, right in there.
So when did Marcus Belgrave come into the picture?
He came out to my high school. I think I was a sophomore, and he did a clinic. I was playing in the jazz band, and he did a clinic at a school, and we did a concert that night. And I asked him if we could play a duet, and we played a duo played Confirmation. And he talked to my parents that night after the set, and he asked them if I could come out and do some gigs that summer. And I started, doing gigs with Marcus, and things kind of blossomed, and I did gigs with various people around Detroit, Chris Pitts, what have you, Roy Brooks.
So when did you hook up with Kenny Cox?
I hooked up with Kenny. I guess I had just graduated from high school, and he was they were were in the process of reforming the contemporary jazz quintet with Charles Moore, and they were all in town, and I think they were preparing to go to Europe. And we just happened to be doing a gig with Joe LaDuca that night, and Charles Moore came down and heard me, and you know, they both liked the way I played, and we spent the next 2 or 3 weeks just rehearsing for like 8 hours a day, all day, and it's just that's another one of the most memorable musical experiences that I've had. Just that month period that we had, or 2 month period, you know, including the tour and all of that. But just the intense rehearsal and just dealing with all the music that Kenny and Charles were dealing with. I think that's been a real influence in my career.
What would you have to say about Danny Spencer?
He's one of my favorite drummers to play with in the world. I think he's just, you know, I don't know how he feels about coming to New York, but I wish he would come there and just light some sparks under some people there, you know, because he fires. He's the first drummer I really played with. He and Lawrence Williams are the first drummers I played with that really fired like that, you know. And then later Roy Brooks and you know, cats like that.
Now you've been playing with Wynton Marsalis for a while. Can you just describe a little bit, you know, what that was like? Well, you know, playing with Wynton it was great. You know, it came at a time when I was in school and I was getting drugged with school, and you know, I had learned all I was going to learn at school, and all I was going to get from school was really a piece of paper, and I was you know, I wanted to do that, but you know, I didn't have an outlet for playing. So when he called, you know, I was on the plane. So you know, I played with Wynton for like 2.5 years, and you know, I think all the musicians in his band are definitely some of the baddest young musicians coming up anywhere. Marcus Roberts and Jeff Watts, we were the rhythm section, and you know, they really forced me to develop myself as a person and a bass player, and I think, you know, I grew musically as well as emotionally and personally with that band more so than, you know, any other thing, because I was really on the road with them, you know, and not in school, not at home, just really being out on the road, and you know, a lot of exposure. You know, we got a chance to record and play with you know, various people. It was a highly visible gig, I guess, and you know, we did projects with people like Charlie Rouse and Joe Henderson and Elvin Jones, and you know, just being around them and being at that level of seriousness and high musicianship was just, you know, an honor, and it was great. So in that sense, what do you get from jazz? I mean, I know you thought it was a great thing, you want to get involved, but does it do something for you in here? Or? Yeah, especially it really jazz to me now is really helps me focus on what it is now to be black and to be a black man, because I think younger people around my age and younger in high schools, you know, I've been doing like some clinics in the high schools and stuff. They're not really in touch with the magnitude and the effect that this music has had on the whole 20th century culture, and I think we really need to preserve and extend the legacy of jazz, and I really am totally dedicated to doing that. And I think one thing that playing with Wynton did, he's the first person that really made me seriously want to do that. It hadn't been something that I was totally conscious of until I really started playing with him, because you know, I liked it and I liked doing it, but you know, I played funk and I did this, and I might still do that in the future, but I realized, you know, that jazz is what the deal is, and that's you know, and I think more people have to know that, and people have to be very serious about conveying that to the public, the youth. Yeah. What got you into jazz? I'll start with Jimmy.
When I was about 4 or 5 years old, my mother had some records of Fletcher Henderson, Bessie Smith, Louis Armstrong, and others. So that got my interest right off the bat. The happy music, you know, foot patting, hand clapping, head popping, snigger popping.
Your family too is you've got a brother.
Yeah, I have a brother. Yeah,
active in the industry.
Right, and it's just stayed with me, you know, all through the years. What can you say? It's a love of the art. I can't think of anything that's more soul satisfying than jazz.
Yeah, Donald, you want to add something to that?
Well, I was introduced to it in junior high school. We had a music teacher there who is very well known around the country. His name is Anderson White Jr., and he introduced a lot of my generation of musicians to jazz, and I found it to be immensely satisfying. I think that's the most truthful statement I can make about it. I could never describe how it makes me feel or why I love to play it. I just do. I'm compelled to play it.
All right. What do you think, you know, the music education has evolved quite a bit over the last like 10, 15 years. What would you like to see more or less of in music education today?
Well, the music education itself is great. And it's too bad it's not a mandatory subject. At least even music should be a mandatory subject in schools. And then you could go from there. And it's something that's being very much neglected by the press and powers that be. It's a life dedication. All the great musicians, they have devoted their lives to this profession. And it's a shame they don't get the respect due as they would get in foreign countries. But this country is just too commercial, you know. All they want is that big buck and the heck with the arts.
You say we're trailing behind maybe Europe and Japan.
Definitely. In all forms of art. This is the least artistic country in the world. At least artistic, appreciative of people.
I agree.
They don't get they don't get introduced to the arts in schools like maybe a few years, maybe 40 or 50 years ago they did, but now it's just go, hurry up, make that fast buck.
Yeah, so you think actually the education for jazz has kind of gone downhill maybe in the last
No, not the education for jazz. I think it's improved quite a bit because now as a school there was no such thing as jazz education. Pick that up out in the streets.
Dan?
Well, I would make one point, and that is that I think that within the educational field itself, I think there's too much placed upon the mysticism of the music. I don't think that there's enough placed upon the fact that there is a great deal of discipline and dedication involved in just studying music. I think too often people want to say that, well, you have to feel it or you have to hear it or you just know. And I'm wondering what in the world does that mean? Don't they realize, as you yourself, we have nothing here but musicians during this taping, every musician knows that any expertise that you acquire has come through long, lonely hours of practicing in some dark room all by yourself. No one seems to want to take that into account and emphasize that in education, particularly jazz education.
What do you see in the future for jazz, and what role do you think the NAJE will play?
First off, you have a large organization of enthusiasts, as well as well-trained musicians, people who have, as Mr. Wilkins was saying, people who have an appreciation of art in all its aspects. If we could come to have a solid forum, a national agenda, we could address a lot of the more fundamental problems that we've just discussed in jazz education. I think that this would by itself automatically uplift or upgrade any education any education pertaining to jazz we would have in any of our institutions, be they private or public.
You got anything to add to that, Jimmy?
Oh, that's covered a lot of ground.
Yeah, I said that's a mouthful.
Now I was worked as a jazz artist in residence at the school system for 5 years, which was a good deal, but it wasn't enough emphasis put on the studies of jazz, like it was a school band rehearsal, stage band rehearsal once a week. And if the kids, so far as trying to learn improvisation, they would either have to come in on the lunch break or stay after school which is difficult. So the program could have been much more expanded in the curriculum. You know, it's not in the curriculum, so it's all voluntary. So,
right.
But those that did try to follow through, they.
How did you feel the Artist in Residence program was received?
I had a great reception out of the Chippewa Valley School System. They rolled out the red carpet for me.
Oh yeah, and how effective?
Very good setup.
How effective do you feel you were?
It worked great for a while. Now, the first 2 or 3 years, I did a lot of classroom lectures and demonstrations on oral history of jazz and all the intricacies of jazz. But as the years went by, there was less involvement with the regular classroom activities. So eventually the program faded out.
So you'd like to see that expanded?
Yes,
that
right,
program
definitely.
expanded. I played trumpet and then played saxophone, because that's really quite a stretch. Right?
Well, you know something? It's actually, I think it's a thing that was around years ago. I read that the classical composers of yesteryear actually had a working knowledge of every instrument that they wrote for in a symphony. Now, I don't claim to think that all of them were virtuosos, but think of a lot of the early composers being able to, knowing the nomenclature and how to get a sound out of violins, horns. They knew about the brass and reed and woodwinds and how to write for them. You have to do that the way some of those classical composers wrote. They felt like they had a knowledge of every instrument. So now I find that after all these years, I meet more and more young multi-instrumentalists in schools and in school programs, both high school and college level. I meet guys who are playing, they come up to me and say, Ira, I play trombone, trumpet, I got a tenor, and I'm thinking of getting a soprano and a flute, and they say, do you think I said, well, gee, I don't know. I would really like to see him stick to one and master it, but if your head and your heart leads you that way, and you start finding that you can get sounds out of these instruments, there's no way I could tell anybody to stop doing it, see.
Wow.
And I see, as I say, multi-instrumentalists are not uncommon. If you remember the band Blood, Sweat, and Tears with Al Cooper and Lou Soloff was on that band, see, you have to go. 1 minute, uno momento. And I think a lot of those gentlemen played organ, someone played organ, alto, guitar, so it's not uncommon anymore. Maybe I'm the only one that carries all the horns around and does it, every night.
But plus, like on a real high proficiency that jazz requires,
jazz does require that, yes.
Pick up a little bit of alto or something like that. I mean, you really play.
Oh yeah, I got serious with each horn as I met her. I started a lot of them as a lark. I had a music store dealer throw me a flute one time and said, here, you're so smart, I saw you play sax, I saw you play trumpet, take this home and try it. And I said, no, that's a little too delicate for me, but I did, and lo and behold, after about 3 months with it, I was getting more air than sound, but then that sound began to break through, and it captivated me. So.
How did you end up getting into jazz? I mean, was there a certain
moment I didn't even know. I was so young, and I didn't even know they called it jazz. So I started playing when I was 3 and a half on the trumpet. So I had been listening to all kind of music. By the time I was 10, I had discovered classical music, and I had been listening to music of Basie and Ellington, and of course the Harry James Band, and never knew they called it jazz. To me, it was music. It was. I guess my outlook was more like the Europeans. I didn't catalog. I listened to all music for what the essence and the element of what it contains, whether it's country western, whether it's Peruvian music or cimbalom or the gongs or shakuhachi flute. To me, it sounds of music. As I said in my witness earlier when I was talking about the Lord, music is all through the Bible. Now, the music they talk about, we don't even know the sounds they made. I guess were any of those sounds recorded in those days, but it does speak of music. The harp, the lyre, the trumpet. The trumpet is a sacred instrument because it's spoken about all through the scriptures, right up to the very end, And so I just felt that music had no category. And then when I was in high school, I think somebody told me, well, they call it jazz, this music you're playing. I said, jazz. And then I started listening to some early Dizzy Gillespie and Charlie Parker, some of the quartets they were doing. Dexter Gordon was around at that time. They were all young men. Stan Getz was about 17 years old. And so I started hearing it and realizing that that was the category it was under. But here, before that, to me, it was just playing. To play music was the joy of life.